This program is designed to provide general information with regards to the subject matters covered. This information is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, sponsors, or station are engaged in rendering any specific and personal, medical, financial, legal, counseling, professional service, or any advice. You should seek the services of competent professionals before applying or trying any suggested ideas.
Good morning, true seekers and true crime junkies. Welcome back to another episode of Hit the Road Jack, Finding the Zodiac. I'm excited to be back actually into the presentation. We have a year full of murders, Jack's whereabouts, what he's doing with Hewlett Packard, and of course a new communication that's just out of the blue. Actually, there's about 3 of them, 2 of which I'm not quite sure their origination or what those letters said. They were found in the FBI FOIA files, but we're going to try and get to the bottom of those. And of course, helping me with that today is Harriet Suchet.
Yes, good morning.
Good
morning.
A
lot of muting today.
Well, we're just climbing right back in at this point. So if there is somebody in the murder scheme here that you have either seen their name in any of the communications or have information in regards to them, then please, interject and climb in, because I'm really just going to run through these rather quickly. A lot of them don't have a lot of information in regards to them other than where they died, or maybe where they were taken from, and of course the manner of death. Other than that, there's just not a lot of information out there on the internet, since the murders are so old and they actually kind of predate the time that things were being loaded onto the internet. So we don't see a lot of information on these unsolved murders. So basically, we left off at the end of October 1984. So we're climbing right back into November 1984. And we have Robert William Hope, 32 years of age. It looks like he was on the 1800 block of North Park, Kingwood, Texas. At 2 p.m., a constable was attempting to serve Hope with civil papers at his residence and found him lying face down in the kitchen, shot multiple times. Now, it doesn't indicate whether or not they felt this was a robbery, which I usually do see those, mentions in some of the information. So if there wasn't a robbery that occurred here, then it sounds to me like somebody had a personal grudge. Christmas of 1984, we know that we are seeing Christmas at the Kirby Street address via Nora's handwriting on the back of the pictures. It does indicate in Jack's paperwork, his probation report, that he is at this same address, though I did not see any pictures of him during this time frame. And we know that previous to this, Jack and Nora had gone through a divorce, and Jack had the, assault with a deadly weapon charge that he is on probation for, which is why we are seeing these reports as described. And when I'm looking at these Christmas pictures, of course, I was a kid during these time frames, and if you had parents that were not working or in between work, as much as we saw Jack during these years, we see what I consider to be a huge amount of presents. I mean, for any typical household, they have approximately 4 children at this point. We can see here is Charles to the left and Dennis to the right in this Christmas picture here. We know that Dennis has 2 sisters, so we're working with 4 children here that we have to provide Christmas for. And at this point in time, Jack is merely making about $312 bi-weekly. So breaking that down is basically $156 a week. So where is this extra money coming from, should I say? I mean, we see bikes. We see all kinds of stuff that's going on in here.
He's working, but he's just not officially working. He's working. He's definitely working.
Well, and I mean, $156 a week. That sounds even awfully low for that time frame.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe even to say that he's not even working full time. I mean, $156. What is that? Oh God. If I wanted to break that down to 40, if he was actively doing 40 hours for $156 a week, I mean, you're talking $3 an hour.
It's it would basically be, I think, close to minimum wage of the time period.
Maybe that's something I should. Wow. Yeah. And a security guard at that. So you've got, the dangers of being a security guard because your job is to protect. And of course, that means that sometimes, as we'll see in some of Jack's reports, you're coming up against some violent offenders, even though they're working at the Hewlett Packard plant. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Switch. I did find a new article in my research from the Lake Berryessa murders. So I thought this one was interesting to read because, again, it takes us back to the hood, which we've been talking about, the way that media has portrayed it. Oh my gosh. Mm-hmm. All right, hold up. Let's talk about media portrayal just for 1 second. I did not really want to climb into anything on the 9/11 attacks, but I did watch a documentary on it a few nights ago. Of course, they were still hard hitting at, Ivins and Hatfill. Of course, Hatfill, we know that they dove in deep on him, stating he was the possible suspect, which then Hatfill sued because he was not the suspect. And he won a ridiculous amount of money in the area of millions. And so, of course, they had focused on Ivins first, then they focused on Hatfill, and then they went back and focused on Ivins again. And at the end of the documentary, the media portrayed that the case was closed on February 19th of 2010 on Ivins. And I about fell out of my chair when this happened. Do you recall that period in our life when we were dealing with?
I believe they closed it. They just automatically said he self-homicided, and that was it.
Well, when Dennis and I were together at this particular point in time, and we about lost our minds when we saw the press release that the FBI stated that they were closing the anthrax case on Ivins. Now, when we lost our crap, I, of course, called then the FBI investigator and explained to him that we had looked at the handwriting and they're closing it on the wrong person. And we literally had to wait almost an entire week to get anything back. But on February 26th of 2010, the Congress came back out with a press release, a follow-up to the FBI, and said, you are not closing this case on Ivins. He doesn't match the MO. His handwriting doesn't match. There is no way you're going to close this on this man. You don't have the evidence to do so. Now, the press release for them closing the case went worldwide, like everybody. So this same tangent that the media uses to go out there and create mass confusion, like the case having been closed, was that went all over the world. But then a week later, on February 26th, when the press release from Congress came out, said, no, you're not closing the case on Ivins. That was at a bare minimum, a complete tiny little press release that got almost little to no attention. And I have to believe that it probably didn't even play across the world as it did when they released the fact they were going to close the case on Ivins. So they put out mass media in regards to a closure, and very little words are said about the fact that, nope, nothing matches, guys. You are not closing this case on Ivins. So imagine my shock when I'm watching this particular documentary to see that at the end of it, you know how they always give you this person ended up doing 6 years, or this person ended up pleading out, or this is what happened. So at the very end of this documentary, across the screen came the words, the case has been closed on Bruce Ivins on February 19th of 2010. What a freaking joke that these documentaries can get away with this. And where do they get their information if they didn't actively investigate the fact that there was a follow-up from Congress saying, you're not closing this case on Ivins. He doesn't match. He wouldn't be the first person.
But
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I remember seeing those letters on Voight's Zodiac.com. And he was saying this handwriting match. He was saying it. This handwriting matches the Zodiac. So I guess he's alive. I remember that. He erased his files. I was like, yeah.
I remember hearing the same thing, just, the public muddling about after the 9/11 and the anthrax attacks, making a statement that the anthrax letters were mailed by the Zodiac. And I thought these people were freaking nuts. I'm like, this guy, he was nothing but a serial killer for a very short period of time back in the 60, 68, 69 era. You guys are absolutely nuts. Little did I know what I'd be climbing into and what the Zodiac was truly a part of.
It's his handwriting. It's
right.
It's Jack Torrance 101 handwriting. The stamps, everything. I've done all of those. It's mind-blowing.
Yes, and we will be making those connections later on. So in this particular article here, this is where I want to say that this was something that was developed and something that came out shortly after the murder at Lake Berryessa and the attempted murder of Brian Hartnell. But the media literally controls the narrative for what the public's going to believe. And at some point in time when they decided, and I don't know if it was Robert Graysmith that put it out there in an attempt to try and dispel the truth about the hood itself, but they perpetrated this square hood that's supposedly like a paper sack on top, upside down on someone's head, when anybody who has ever dealt with material knows that a material square-shaped hood is not going to sit upright in a square manner like that. So I highly disbelieve the notion that Graysmith has given us, or Voight has given us, or any of these other people in the media, that this thing was actually like a paper sack upside down, versus what we're going to read in this article. So it says, Napa slain, scores of tips are checked out. Napa and Vallejo authorities investigated scores of tips on the suspected code killer. Today, the day of the funeral of the latest victim, attractive blonde co-ed Cecilia Ann Shepard, 22. The leads resulted from the publication of composite sketches and a description of the suspects seen at Lake Berryessa by the three girls about 3 hours before the stabbing of Miss Shepard and her boyfriend, Brian Hartnell, 20. Now, the interesting part is that they claim that the suspect that they're looking for is something that is stalking these three girls, or standing around gawking at them, if you will. You can go to just about any beach and be gawked at. There's always some creeper in the corner that's staring at all the females. Doesn't make them killers, but it's interesting that they're now focusing on this particular suspect. It says, however, neither sheriffs nor police officers reported locating the likely slayer of 4 young persons since last December, still serious. Meanwhile, Hartnell remained on the serious list and under protective guard at Queen of the Valley Hospital. The services for the University of California at Riverside senior music major are scheduled at 2 p.m. today in the sanctuary of Pacific Union College Church. She attended that college before transferring this year. Authorities awaited the results of fingerprint comparisons by the computerized laboratories of the FBI in Washington, D.C. Prints were obtained from a payphone booth in Napa, from which the killer apparently reported the crime to police. Now, what I want to know is that, for heaven's sakes, you're talking about a public payphone. Do you know how many people back in the day were actively using these things? Everybody and their mother.
Yeah. So how many fingerprints were on there?
I don't know what to do with my hands. And how do we determine which ones are actively those of the Zodiac Killer? Does it mean that they made identification of all other fingerprints on that phone booth, except for one set, and that they then attributed that to the Zodiac? I really want to understand how they sorted this information out.
Him. They were making sure who. That's my opinion. I mean, it's inevitable that they get to the phone. They know he's going to use it. It's cleaned off. He grabs it. It's all staged. And this is a huge conspiracy to go after who they believed had something to do with with these two. It has something to do with who killed Martin Luther King. That's all I got. Which was friends of the Kennedys. So
I feel like the Zodiac Killer making note in one of his communications that he wore cement, airplane cement on his fingertips to prevent any source of fingerprints being left behind. I feel like that was him calling out the media because he automatically already knew that the media was telling stories.
Well, how about the palm prints on the phone? All this stuff that could be the what ifs, the maybes.
But
So,
why would you do just your fingers if you
Yeah.
wouldn't do
So when
your
you-
entire hand?
You'll be like this in the old-fashioned phone. It would be
No, I get how you'd hold it, but I mean, obviously the Zodiac understands countermeasures to being caught and
Mhm.
how to cover up the type of forensics that they would use to make identifications. Why would you only apply it to your fingertips and not to your entire hand? I mean, your hand, your entire hand has a surface of ridges that can be specifically identified, creases. I mean, there's a lot of identification that's found inside the palm, not just on the fingerprints.
Well,
Anyways,
I'm stuck with the mindset that it was pretty much a conspiracy to do these things, and somebody was following him and said, "Oh yeah, that's our guy. He's on the phone now," and verify that the prints are his, but they just disappear. And,
Well, I've seen the palm print. It's not clear enough for me to make out the ridges on it, but they definitely have one in the case files along with
Exactly.
fingerprints. But how are we to know that those are the Zodiacs? I'm just throwing that out
There's
there.
always speculations. I'm going with that they were taking pictures from above with the satellites. We were the only people that really had those satellite capabilities to do that
at that time.
Yeah. And that's where Robert Abel comes in, and NASA and all that, right there in Texas, where Jack was very familiar with. So
Right.
The eyes in the sky, the eyes of Texas are upon you all the live long day, the eyes of Texas.
Huh.
Yeah,
Okay, that makes some sense out of that. Well, it goes on to say they also were tracing a light blue Chevrolet driven by the suspect and other evidence left at the knifing scene, a remote southwest lakeshore spot. So again, I still have not seen the words Chevy Impala from any of these individuals. And like I said, we determined that the vehicle that Nora had, that Jack may have had access to, was a Chevy Biscayne, but it was a two-door light blue Chevy. And here it says, it just says light blue Chevrolet. So I still haven't seen the words in any of the communicate or in any of the articles or police reports or otherwise that state a specific model of vehicle, just a light blue Chevrolet. So it says a psychiatrist suggested today the slayer may be psychotic rather than psychopathic. This is indicated, he said, by his full-blown delusions. Also, he may be hopped up with narcotics or dangerous drugs at the time of his murders, which may account for the laughing frenzies he goes into during the crimes. So let's talk about that for a minute. I mean, we definitely see Jack in some psychotic pictures. I mean, he looks absolutely insane after killing the next door neighbor's animals. Yeah. We know that he did methamphetamines and he made methamphetamines. It's something that he taught Dennis how to do, and Dennis picked up on and continued with. And so this whole laughing frenzy and the notion that he may be on drugs are all still consistent. Jack cannot be excluded from that. And that's another thing, I almost want to discuss about all of these other fake suspects. Nobody has any evidence that these individuals were involved with drugs. But we're going to talk about some of the things that the Zodiac did say, which are consistent with some of the things that we're looking at.
Well, we know that he's constantly looking for that cure, that peyote stamp thing.
Right. Well, but I think that's outside of it, and that's a drug in itself. I mean, obviously.
That's definitely, I mean, I'm from the Napa area. I knew older people who were doing that crazy stuff. Mescaline, everything. But anyway, so we know he's got some weird connection to that, and he's trying to break the cure.
And here's on the hood, they said there also was speculation that the squarish, again, squarish. I love that they use the proper word to describe, because instead of being pointed, instead of being rounded, we had a squarish hood. They did not say square like a paper sack. They did not give any specific indications as to what that top looked like. But again, we know how material works, and that simply would not have stood up the way they portrayed it in their books and the media. The squarish black hood worn by the killer at Lake Berryessa may be similar to those worn by some motorcycle gangs, or the idea for it may have originated in a comic strip which shows an executioner with a squarish black hood and big eyelets plus a curly Q symbol on his chest. Or it may be a combination of both. Did you find what comic strip they were talking about that was in?
I think that would be something like way back there, 30s, 40s, which
Well, we know
we're dealing with Hearst, the big newspapers of the time.
comic strips, using comic strips, always using something. Yeah, always using something from the media. We do know that Jack did ride motorcycle. He had a motorcycle that was purportedly owned by Doris Reynolds, but he was in possession of it. And when he had brought back Danny Reynolds to his house in South Lake Tahoe, he had to file a police report against Danny Reynolds for attempting or having stolen this motorcycle, even though it had been wrecked and probably wasn't in a good running position. Jack reported it as being stolen, even though it was technically owned by Danny's mom. All right.
I think it's the motorcycle that he was allegedly driving the night that he busted up his shoulder, D.B. Cooper time. That Dennis said he remembered that. So, emphatically, he remembered it.
Right. Well, and evidently it is true in form, because we are seeing that stuff in police reports as indicated earlier in the presentation. So now this brings me back to Dennis Kaufman's book, in which case he has he's got a little bit to say here. It says 1985, Jack is still on probation for pulling a gun on Mary and I, and he is eventually released from probation 6 months early for good behavior. Jack has been working for 3 years at this time. This is the longest Jack ever worked since we met him. I believe that he stopped killing after his arrest in 1983 until years later, when he would start where he had left off. And that's why I say we're about to pick up pretty heavy in 1985. It says from 1985 through 1988, Jack was deeply into hypnosis. He said that he could reprogram his subconscious mind by using self-hypnosis. I never thought about it, but I wonder what he was trying to reprogram. Was it his desire to kill? By 1986, Jack appeared to everyone that he was a changed man. It had been 5 years since he quit drinking, and he even apologized to me about how he had treated me when I was growing up. Jack worked and lived in the same place for 9 years until he retired at age 63 in 1991. Asterisk, I'm sure that Jack felt pretty comfortable wearing his security uniform because he looked like a police officer and no one would ever suspect him of anything. During his 3-year involvement with self-hypnosis, he would try and detach himself from his body. He wanted to leave his body and travel around in a formless state. In 1988, Jack achieved this goal. He said that he had lifted up out of his body and that it is all he would say. He never talked about or practiced his hypnosis again. Jack had experienced something that scared the shit out of him. How would he would never talk about what he had experienced. So over here on the right-hand corner, we can see this self-hypnosis symbol that Dennis is talking about that Jack would use. I believe he said that he would use a penny on a string.
Yeah, pendulum.
Pendulum?
Yeah.
So basically, as you look around this, you see clockwise, you see, I'm not sure what the CW is. Clockwise.
Clockwise.
So yeah, that's all clockwise and then counterclockwise. But he has a CWI, and I'm not sure what that means. But the other things
I think it means counterclockwise. It's still.
Well, but.
Yeah.
So CCW is counterclockwise. So this one, CCW, going counterclockwise. And then there's CW, 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 but then CWI on the bottom left quarter of this particular circle. The part that really interests me is that at the top it says don't know. So you just don't know the answer.
Oh, okay. Then it's I don't know. That's what it is.
I don't want to know. Okay, he placed that I so close to the CW that it's part of the actual statement. So at the top, it indicates if the pendulum swings in this area in a particular order that he doesn't know the answer to the question. And at the bottom, it says, I don't want to know. That's kind of
something
freaky.
Telling him, I have a pendulum upstairs, if I remember right. It was supposed to be on the string.
Well, I can tell you that when Dennis wrote this book, he did not know the things that I know, like the association to the letters from Tom Voight from the Zodiac Killer. Also, the experience that the Zodiac described in this letter to Tom Voight is very similar. And I'm going to read a bit of that to you, even though we're not in 2000 yet when these letters are actually written to Tom Voight. But if we looked where he said he wanted to be lifted up out of his body, and that is all he would say. Now, in a letter direct to Tom Voight from the Zodiac Killer, it says, in those years, I was an LSD and heroin addict with a taste for the bizarre, subcultural and underground lifestyles. I would have brownouts of consciousness that could literally last for days. In that state, I experienced the graphic deeds of the Zodiac Killer as if I was an observer, not the perpetrator. So that's as if to say he is up and out of his body, watching himself
out of his control. I mean, he's under MK Ultra.
Woo! I got myself all kinds of goosebumps right now on that, because those two statements.
I'm getting them too now. Okay, Jack, we know you're here. Okay.
Those two statements, one from Dennis, one from the Zodiac, are so closely related to each other in the sense it's like hypnosis in itself is supposed to be lifting you up out of your body, basically. What did Jack recognize? What came to mind? What hit Jack and what scared Jack now intrigues me just as much as it probably did Dennis. Another series of murders that were going on during this time was 12 homeless people in Bombay, India. They called them the Stoneman murders, but obviously this gained national attention and was all over the world that these were taking place. May again been just for media sales. And again, newspapers, who knows? I mean, honestly speaking, every time I see one of these things pop up and disappear as fast as they started, it always makes me wonder what's really going on, because this just truly is not how serial killers work. They take a break, sure, but then they eventually come back around again. I mean, it's not very often you see them go through killing sprees to never, ever do it again. I mean, how do you get your kicks off of something like that and then control it for the rest of your life to never do it again? On March 6th of 1985, we have a Hewlett Packard report from Jack that shows him still at Hewlett Packard. He is complimenting an officer who seemingly has a problem with other female employees and behaves in a manner less than acceptable, but Jack is giving him a recommendation. It really kind of speaks volumes to Jack's ability or willingness to allow women to be degraded and then still promote that male in the face of that type of degradation. So let's see here. This is what the report says. Officer Browning has had several complaints registered against him by employees at Hewlett Packard, especially female employees, that his conversation with them has been less than desirable and to the point of vulgar insinuations. He has had one complaint from a female employee that he touched her in such a way that was undesirable. On several occasions, Officer Browning's off-key jokes have been told in such a loud voice that the HP employees have found them to be undesirable and have commented about his conduct being very unbecoming of that of a security officer. During his tour of duty at Hewlett Packard, S.O. Browning has proven his ability and knowledge of his job. He has been a willing and reliable worker and cooperative fellow employee, and it is felt that his talents could be used to CPP's advantage at a different post. So, I mean, I get kind of sickened by this, that he is promoting is, okay, he doesn't fit in at HP because of his innuendos and his jokes and his flippant behavior towards females. I mean, we clearly didn't have a zero tolerance policy back in 1985, because otherwise this guy wouldn't be getting away with this stuff. He'd have been fired on the spot.
Can I say something? Because this is one of the biggest reasons I ended up in the Zodiac cases. This is, I believe, almost 10 years to the day where I witnessed some really strange activities of laundry, like Zodiac, laid out a certain way at Sigmund Stern Grove. And my mind's eye can still see, it looks like it's uniform material, like the uniforms they wore there. And it was a woman and a man that had been found in the pond or the creek face down. And I never got to find out what that was about, but I remember that clothing, and it's almost 10 years to the day. It was 1995. It scared my dog so much she never wanted to go back to the park there. So this is another reason why I got into the Zodiac cases. That was Zodiac 101, the laundry, everything.
Well, I mean, this letter speaks to me in a couple different ways. One, there's a disregard for females, and we can see that clearly. If he's going to promote a person or state that a person should, go to another spot because it's offended too many females here rather than having been fired, then there's a disregard for females. Second off is that the I-45 killings and the Texas murders, I have read on several occasions that people had witnessed somebody who appeared to be either in a police or a security uniform, that they looked like a professional assisting someone on the side of the road before that person either went missing or was found dead. So we have that Jack, again, is in possession.
Yeah.
Well, he's in possession of it. I don't know that it links him as much as you can't exclude him because of it.
Yeah,
he's now fitting the description during a time frame that a rash of murders are occurring, and they believe that a possible suspect was wearing some type of a uniform, and Jack is in possession of one. And we see him back and forth to Texas all the time. In fact, here's one trip back to Texas. So we do know that he completed this final report that we got the information from about who he's working from for Pinkerton. It's Hewlett Packard, but he's on contract from Pinkerton. And of course, he doesn't mail it until 4/1 of 1985. I'm not sure who gets away with that, because you obviously did not comply with your rules of probation if you're not filling out your reports properly and timely and getting them in when they should be sent in. This report was written September 1st of 1984, but not mailed until April of 1985, which is where we're sitting now. We see another report from Jack. It says on 4/6/85, 1500, which is approximately 3 p.m., I received a telephone call, and the caller stated that referred to that Annette Slagle was stealing computers from HP, referred to incident of $100,000 computer stolen in January of 85. Caller said she was supporting her cocaine habit. Real deep voice. I did not hear any background noises. I love that he spelled tried with a Y, to get the caller to identify himself. No success. And he spelled that with 1 C. So we see some of these habits that we've seen by the Zodiac, to not use the proper double letters, to misspell words. Jack's got it honest. April 6th of 1985, that HP report. Okay, wait a minute. Described deep voice, but no identity. Again, not sure why he kept these reports. See, these are reports that I physically copied from his belongings all the way in 2009 and beyond. I mean, he dies in 2006, but he lugged this stuff around and kept it for a particular reason, for sure. Jack, then we see this here. Jack is in Texas again in 1985. And it says on the back of this picture, Granny D in Texas in front of their house or trailer, 1985. Now, if I'm not wrong, I thought Dennis had said that Jack bought that trailer for Flova.
I believe so. Yeah.
I know that it won't. Yeah. So, and of course, the only reason why I state that Jack is in fact there is that we see his VW behind them. So this is actively Jack's VW. We've seen it in other pictures already on other trips that he'd made it back to Texas. So we definitely know Jack's here during that time, and what time frame that is, we can only kind of try to guesstimate based on the foliage on the trees, possibly indicating that it's definitely not winter or after fall. So it's going to be either spring or summer once the leaves have returned to the trees. On May 13th of 1985, we have another murder, 54-year-old Jody Williams James on I-45, a quarter mile north of Tees Road on Conroe, Texas. So there's a lot of stuff that's going on around Conroe, Texas. Operating a tractor trailer, he pulled over. So Jody is a male. He pulled over on the shoulder to complete his repairs. Witnesses driving by observed Jody on the ground next to his truck, waving one arm. On May 14th of 1985, Jody's wallet was found along Highway 105 West, just west of Loop 336 toward Montgomery. His credit cards, checks, and pictures were found along the same roadway, but farther west. This is another tactic that we have witnessed the Zodiac do, is take belongings and basically on his way away from the crime scene, depositing them almost as if to send people off into a trail to look for him as a suspect in the opposite direction of where he's really going. Correct?
Well, I'm seeing it as leaving a coded message. Yeah,
A good possibility.
Yeah, that the trail's going to go certain places to, let's hypothetically say, it's going to say, that the street is named Jack where the purse is found. You know, it's just a weird world of how they were doing it.
So it's kind of like you taking us back to Black Dahlia and lipstick killings,
Exactly.
because Black Dahlia is killed in Hollywood. Degnan's remains are found on Hollywood Boulevard, and Black Dahlia's remains are found near Degnan Boulevard in Hollywood.
And then Nixon's, that was Nixon's congressman control too.
What do you mean?
It just all goes back. Yeah, he was when he was in Congress. That was his. Yeah. So for me, it leads back to Circle, Zodiac, Jack. It's
right.
Okay.
Now we just have a string and series of murders on May 30th of 1985. So our last one was May 13th. Then on May 30th of 1985, we've got 27-year-old Vicky Gale Purdy found in an embankment in Honolulu. Now this is Hawaii, and it may have absolutely nothing to do with Jack, but it did make the presentation just as being an unsolved murder. And she was raped and strangled with her hands tied behind her back, and we know that there has been cords and tying of people up involved in some of these cases. But then we hop right back into the Texas murders with June 8th of 1985. Unidentified human skeletal remains in Cimarron County subdivision in Magnolia, Texas. It's a white male, 20 to 40 years of age, 5'3" or 4 inches in height, but nothing else. Doesn't describe how he was killed or where he went missing from. I have very little information on him. August 8th of 1985, 52-year-old Helen Patton, Frankford neighborhood of Philadelphia, railway maintenance yard, stabbed 19 times and sexually assaulted. She was nude from the waist down and had her blouse pushed up to expose her bare chest. September of 1985, approximately 23 to 26 years of age, Jane Doe number 2 on the League City killing fields. We actually figured out who Jane Doe 2 is, and that she is in fact part of the unsolved killing sprees that occurred in the League City killing fields. It said white female with red brown hair, gunshot wound to the back. So I just need to update this particular entry. But the point of these entries here at this point is that they fit within that time frame in which foliage would be on the trees, when the leaves would have already, been fully bloomed and out there. So I've placed these ones in here in order to include that or at least there's a possibility to be looking at the Zodiac Killer for these, and that we know Jack was in Texas during this one of these time frames, at least during the time when the trees were in full bloom. I think this is going to be the last of several of the couple's murders that occurred in Florence, Italy, and that was on September 8th of 1985. The Lovers Lane murders, as they're dubbed, is a consistency with the Zodiac Lovers Lane murders. It says the modus operandi of the monster was always the same. His victims were all couples who were alone, usually in a parked car in an isolated country areas in the night. That's also consistent with Berkowitz, right? No.
Well, I hope you can hear me, but I looked at those cases and I was looking for the common denominator of all their names. And those two right there ran a store, a shoe store. And these are all having something to do with expensive shoes and deliveries.
Huh.
So that's what I found. And that was the common denominator. So
well, the son of Sam murders is Berkowitz. I'm asking. I I get too many murderers stuck up here in my brain. But again, isolated couples parked in cars. This is pretty much the son of it's almost identical to the son of Sam, and we just went through those. So we're seeing this pop back and forth. So it says the attacker would wait until the couple started getting intimate. This way their defenses would be down and they would be less likely to notice what was going on outside the car. The monster would then come out of the dark and ambush the man and woman, shooting both with a gun and then finishing off his work with a knife. The crime would end with the attacker carrying out his ritual of disfiguring the female victim's body with a knife. The crimes took place on moonless nights and on an evening when most people didn't have to work the next day, either because it was a weekend or a holiday. The attacker always switched area from one crime to the next, ambushing couples in a completely different part of the Florence suburbs. Now, if Jack's part of what we think he's a part of, he has access to hopping on a flight and going pretty much anywhere he wants to go. The fact that this is happening on weekends or holidays gives him ample opportunity, since he is currently working now at this point in time, but he wouldn't be suspected as being off in another country doing something as, nasty as this if he's back here purportedly working as a full-time father and parent and all of these other things that he makes it appear as though he's doing. So on September 7th or 8th, they said, I'm not sure why they had 2 dates. It says on the 9th of 7 or 8 September 1985, Jean Mitchell Kravitchvili, 25, a musician of Georgian ancestry, and tradeswoman Nadine Moriot, both from Audencourt, France, were shot and stabbed while sleeping in their small tent in a woodland area near San Cassiano. I cannot pronounce his name, so I'm just going to leave that one alone. Was killed the male was killed a short distance away from the tent while trying to escape. Morio's body was mutilated. Because the killer had murdered 2 foreigners, there was not yet a missing persons report. The killer sent a taunting note. So this is where it gets interesting. Along with a piece of Morio's breast. This takes me back to Black Dahlia. I mean, I know he sent in her purse and her belongings, but he mutilated her breast. And we are seeing that these mutilations are happening to females in the Zodiac stuff.
It actually goes back to 1888, Jack the Ripper stuff too.
Right. To the state. Okay, so they sent in a piece of Morio's breast to the state prosecutor along with a taunting note, Silvia Della Monica, stating that a murder had taken place and challenging the local authorities to find the victims. A person picking mushrooms in the area discovered the bodies a few hours before the letter arrived on Della Monica's desk. So here we've got the taunting that we see with the Zodiac cases. I mean, it just keeps going on. Hard to separate these out, and due to proximity and time, one would want to say, oh, this isn't possible because it's in another country, or oh, this isn't possible because the time frame is so far apart from 69 or even 47 with Black Dahlia to 85 in Florence, Italy. That is one of the things that prevents law enforcement from making active identifications on a person who is moving about and committing series of crimes, because they want to tend to believe that it's either too far apart or too long of a distance between the last murders. And that's simply not true. On October 5th of 1985, 17-year-old Michelle Doherty Thomas was last seen leaving her Alta Loma home in Texas. That's all the information I have on that one. So either the body has not been found, and maybe they need to be looking at unidentified remains here in California or in other states to see if they can't put those together, because again, proximity and distance is not a prerequisite for not looking at other bodies or trying to solve or figure out who these remains belong to. November 29th in 1985, unidentified human skeletal remains on Lake Conroe at Rush Creek. Bore writing, and I'm thinking when they say bore writing, that must have been on the body, which again, that takes me back to the Black Dahlia era and the lipstick killings that occurred in the LA area, not necessarily the lipstick killer from Chicago, Illinois. I think that was a cross connection in itself to the 47 through 49 lipstick killings in LA. But it says bore writing, which included references to Japanese in World War II. That one would be, I think, an interesting one to research to see if we couldn't come up with some information as to what that writing was. But it says I'm a little confused with the unidentified skeletal remains and Lake Conroe at Rush Creek, where the remains bore writing, which included references to Japanese in World War II, or what is it? The clothing? I really would like to know, because
it might be written on the skull.
Well, we've got the reference. Well, if it's on the skull, then that indicates the individual or the suspect had to come back at a later date after the body had degraded and written on it. So where these references were is very interesting or intriguing to me, because we know that Jack had a love in Japan. We know that he was ripped away from her when the war ended. We know that he was in World War II. We know that the Zodiac made reference to the Mikado, which was a Japanese play. There's just a whole lot of things in this particular unidentified remains that make me want to look deeper into this case. December 26th of 1985. Jack may not have had anything to do with this, but I can believe that people in the underground perverted system that the Zodiac talks about could have had some part in this. December 26th of 1985, 53-year-old Diane Fossey, Volcanoes National Forest in Rwanda. It says Karasok Research Center is where she was working at. She's found dead in her bed with a machete she confiscated from poachers buried in her head. She was responsible. Parties were theorized to be illicit black market and the poaching of gorillas. And we know that Jack is a fan of poaching as well. So it was a very small connection. But the point being is somebody wanted her to stop doing her work, which was protecting these animals that they were getting big dollars for.
Well, can I say something real quick? Because you're talking about Rwanda and all this, and I just stated that.
Well, if you don't want to get to the letter, then yes, you can segue, but I don't really have a lot of information or ability to answer.
It's covering the stuff that I'm covering from 1888. And what
Rwanda?
Rwanda was part of the British Empire. And all the stuff that we are covering has its roots in all that era. So that's what I just wanted to add. That's so good that you brought that up. There is a link. That's what I'm saying too.
Yeah, I mean, again, the powers that rule the world are all over the world. They're not just isolated here to whatever agenda they have with media and sales and money. January 14th of 1986, 17-year-old Regina Sakamoto is killed in Honolulu. So we have another murder, but it's almost a year apart in Honolulu. Strangled and raped with her hands tied behind her back. Once again, she had missed her school bus and her body was found the next day. Over the next 3 months, we have Denise Hughes, Luis Medeiros, and Linda Pesky that are killed. And I'm not sure, I'm going to have to go back to look up. I did not notate where these occurred. I did notate that I needed to research them. It's likely that they were probably killed in Honolulu as well, since it's following the Regina Sakamoto murder. But further into January of 1986, we have 68-year-old Anna Carroll, Frankfurt neighborhood of Philadelphia, obviously Pennsylvania, stabbed to death in her apartment. Like the first victim, nude from the waist down with her shirt pulled up to expose her chest. So there must have been some type of connection that I had there. But again, I just don't have enough information on these murders. Over the next 4 years, the Frankfurt slasher, would claim 7 more lives. I had not heard of the Frankfurt slasher. Had you?
No, but it's just something to look into. You know, who's the Frankfurt slasher? Right. Like Jack the Ripper. Sorry.
It says over the next, let's see. Some of the victims were seen with a middle-aged white male before their deaths. So maybe that is why I put it in here. Carol Dowd was a 1990 victim found behind a fish market in 1990, and Leonard Christopher was convicted of her death. However, it is believed that he is innocent since he was a black male and did not match the description of the suspect in other crimes. And another crime was committed while he was incarcerated, instilling the notion that he was not the Frankfurt slasher. So here we have another person who's a patsy, an innocent person in jail for something that they had not committed. Oh boy. Well, we just now made it to the actual letters. And I don't believe we have enough time. We've got about 30 seconds left here, Harriet, before we hit these. But when we're done with this segment, please don't hop off. I'd like to discuss with Juan a pre-record for 4th of July. So stay on with me. We'll make it, these communications will be the first thing that everybody gets to see on 4th of July. They're going to be very interesting ones with solves by Harriet Suchet, which we love. I want to thank everybody for being here. Have a wonderful weekend and a great week, and we will see you next Friday.
Yes,
thank you, Harriet.
We'll be here.
Oh,